This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks, here as always with Cara Csizmadia from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. We're super excited to bring you another RV industry outdoor recreation focused episode as we do the fourth week of every single month. As a reminder, we're available on a podcast for you guys who want to listen in later, Google, Apple, all those kinds of things. It's actually updated, Cara. I finally did it. Finally made time to do that. So all those new episodes are available to download there, as well as on mcfiresidechats.com, moderncampground.com as well. And then we're super excited to have a couple special guests with us today, too. We're going to talk about their RVing adventures. We've got RVLove, an intentional adventure. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves. So, I don't know, you want to start, Mark and Julie? Tell us a little bit about yourselves, just kind of a brief bio, and then we'll dive into those details of that 8,500 epic mile road trip.
Hi, well, yes, we're Julie and Mark Bennett from RVLove, and if you are familiar with us, we sold our home in 2014 in Colorado, hit the road in an RV full-time for over 6 years, and we're now back in a home base here in Colorado and back to part-time RVing, but we've been sharing along the way as RVLove, written a couple of books and just been to all 50 states and just keep on revisiting them because there's so many awesome things to see. And we've been to Canada too, several states in Canada, but not provinces, but haven't been to all of them yet.
Well, you'll get there, I'm sure. Ben and Michelle, tell us about Intentional Adventure.
Well, first, I have to say, Julie, your Colorado accent is amazing.
Thanks, Ben. I've been working on it.
Tell you're a native. That's amazing. Hey, we are Ben and Michelle of Intentional Adventure. We sold all of our stuff and decided to flee from the law, and RV living was the way to go. So they haven't caught us yet. But no, we decided we wanted a different life. So we sold our stuff, bought an RV about, 4 years ago? Yeah. Are we on year 4 or year 5? I forget.
We're on year 5.
On year 5. Yeah. And we have 2 kids, Eli and Lacey, who are now 11 and 13. So it's a special time in life to be with them 24 hours a day. We're learning a lot right now. But no, we're loving it. We're just traveling the country and finally made it out west this year to California. So, yeah, just enjoying the travel life.
Awesome. Before we kind of get into both of your stories from RVLove and Intentional Adventure, Phil and Shane are here with us always. Phil from the RVDA, RV Dealers Association of America, Shane from the Canadian Recreational Vehicle Association, and lots of other things as we were discussing prior to the show starting, and obviously Kurt Repanshek from National Parks Traveler. Gentlemen, before we dive into these two couples' stories, and we're obviously going to touch on the RV industry and outdoor rec later, is there anything kind of pressing, breaking that you really feel is important that we definitely need to discuss on the show that has come across your desk recently?
Well, Brian, I got a couple of things. Just this week, 2 reports were released, one by Thor Industries and one by KOA, and they were somewhat related, and it's the hot topic of gas prices going into the Memorial Day weekend and how's that going to impact travel and camping in particular. And I thought it was interesting because, and Shane probably can talk about this as well, but, both studies kind of said, well, people might take shorter trips, but they're certainly not going to forego their vacations. And, there's a lot of buzz in the general press about gas prices and is that going to stop people from traveling? Well, these 2 studies certainly show that on the RV side and the camping side of the travel industry, that doesn't appear it's going to happen. Sure, there'll be a segment of people who take shorter trips, stay longer in one place, but they're going to continue to travel and enjoy, one of the, hopefully post-COVID summers of travel. And they both came out this week, and I just thought that was pretty interesting.
I will say, like, and I'll admit I haven't had a chance to dive into this report as deeply as probably all of you have, but somebody slacked me the other day. It was actually Scott Foos, who is on our open discussion show the first week of every month, and he said, and again, I haven't had a chance to dive into this and verify it, but he said in the report he was curious because they said other types of travel will feel the impact of the economy even more than camping, with 3 in 10 campers taking fewer non-camping vacations, as I think you just pointed out, Phil. But then 30% of campers will take fewer camping trips, which is kind of the same thing the way he was reading it. And so he was kind of curious how they broke down that data. And again, I didn't have a really chance to dive into that and see how they broke it down and compare it. But yeah, it's a fascinating, interesting time. We talked about inflation a little bit last week and how that's going to impact things. But I think people are definitely going camping, but their behavior is probably changing. Is that what you've seen, Phil, Shane?
Yeah, it's ironic. I was just on a couple interviews. I was on a radio interview Friday and then a TV interview yesterday. Both, both reaching out to talk about the impact of the gas prices, and they noticed that it was Canadian RV and Camping Week, so they reached out. And I saw those reports, Phil, and I was down at the industry breakfast and listened to Toby speak a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting. My take on it is we're still a little early in the game. It's nice that everybody's seeing that or forecasting that. Hopefully, that is a good thing. But as we get later on this year, let's hope that it's still looking that way. It's a lot of things hitting us at once, but it's certainly encouraging so far that a lot of people are going out there camping.
Brian, I think this is something definitely to watch. Just this morning, I was talking to some colleagues, and in California, of course, the highest gas prices in the United States, $6, maybe higher than $6. And somebody was just in Yosemite National Park, and they thought that the visitation was kind of down, and whether it was directly related to the gas prices or not, I don't know. But I know if I had to pay $6 a gallon for a rig that got 10 or 12 miles to the gallon, I'd rethink my plans for the summer, and it's still early.
Well, and I want to make sure that we're not going to obviously dive into inflation. We talked about that last week, but I just want to make sure we preface that by saying yes, it's gas prices, but I think the conversation is too focused on gas prices. I read a report yesterday on CNBC that said electricity bills for people are up 40% year over year. So it's everything. It's the tomato that costs double that it did before, plus your electricity, plus your gas, plus everything else. That's going to be interesting. So. But anyway,
it really is, and it's going to be interesting to see how the concessionaires in the national parks deal with it, because they've got increased prices, and they might have labor issues with not enough help. So I think it's going to be an expensive summer.
One of the things that is happening up here in Canada is the airports. The lineups are brutal. There was a picture of luggage outside one of the terminals, and there were hundreds of empty suitcases because it was so disoriented for arrivals. So when the RV industry is faced with, again, the airline industry going what they're going through, we're looking a lot better as far as a motor vacation right now than having to walk through an airport or getting there 4 or 5 hours before their flight, which is crazy.
Well, let's dive into some of these stories. And Mark and Julie, please, we'll start with you guys, but if you have anything you want to contribute here to the discussion of how maybe it's impacting you guys as RV consumers, feel free to kind of jump in there. But otherwise, feel free to, we'd love to hear a little bit about your story, your trip, your 8,500 mile. That's a lot of miles.
Sure, yeah.
I actually calculated it's over 13,700 kilometers
for the Canadian market.
For the Canadian market, yeah.
But yeah, so it obviously didn't slow down our travels too much. Of course, the fuel prices came up kind of in the middle of our trip, but in our audience and our followers, some of them have said that it's impacting them with the fuel prices and the other economic changes in prices. But I think that in general, what's really great about RVing, and especially for full-time RVers, is that so many of your expenses are variable. If your fuel prices go up, you can travel slower and less distance, stay longer, use campground memberships that allow you to stay places longer. or a lower cost. There's a lot of variables that you can work, whereas in regular lifestyle, there's more fixed costs. So that's one of the things I think is really
that's
positive.
what we found when we sold our home back in 2014 is instead of like 2/3 fixed and 1/3 variable expenses, it flipped and 2/3 were variable and 1/3 was fixed. And what was interesting about that is if you do get hit with things that are out of our control, ultimately higher fuel prices, rising campground fees, we're all seeing as well on top of the fuel prices. Even if you get hit with an unexpected and expensive repair on your RV, which we've certainly had, and it's just like, you know what, we're going to pull up for a while and we're just going to slow down the travel pace, and I think you can quickly recover from that. But I mean, everyone's definitely feeling what's going on. I think we timed our trip really well. Just for those that are watching, we were full-time for a bit over 6 years, and almost 2 years ago now we did switch gears to part-time RVing. We now have a Colorado home base again, and we left in early December and left for Colorado to the Keys. And it was supposed to be a 5,000-mile, 2-month road trip, but then we kept looking at the weather and thinking, well, we don't have to go back home. It's cold, it's snowy, we got to take the dog out, and we were having a great time in Florida and got to visit some fantastic new parks for the first time in South Carolina as well. And we ended up coming back to Colorado. We did a diversion via Arizona and California because they're on the way, right? That's how we ended up doing 8,500 miles in 3.5 months. And I think what's interesting about that for us, and we just did a big report about this on our website. It was a massive blog post, but lots of information in there, is that in our full-time RV life, we averaged about 9,000 to 10,000 miles a year. So we did almost as many miles in 3.5 months as we would normally do in a year of full-time, because as full-time, you're just going in one direction. You don't
have to go there and back. You
right.
just go there and then to the next there. You don't have to keep coming back. And so that was a big part of the mileage for sure. But.
And I think that, speaking to fuel prices, and, Phil might have some more input on this too from the RV sales perspective, is that what's going on now. I think people are always mindful of what is the fuel economy on your RV, but maybe more top of mind now. We were in a big Class A for 6 years. We had 2 Class A's, and they average about
7 or 8
miles per gallon, which sounds scary. But remember, we're not using those for exploring and errands. We have a tow vehicle for that. So the average across, both vehicles, we ended up finding that our average fuel economy was about 15 miles
per gallon. When you're towing a car that can get 25 or 30 miles per gallon and you're driving it more than the RV, that makes it quick to average that out. And then on this trip, we used a Class C on a Mercedes chassis, and we got close to 15 miles per gallon on that. 14.
And diesel's more expensive than gas. I think it's like $8
right
in California for diesel. So there's a few things for people to think about. There's just a lot of variables in there.
So tell us about your long trip. I mean, obviously you told us where you went, but what were some of the highlights, some of the exciting things or parks or campgrounds you saw or along the way?
Well, we spent 2 weeks in the Florida Keys. I think that's my first.
That was definitely exciting because, we've been trying to get into a certain park that we can get into discounted for many years, and we finally got that reservation. Plus, we had a lot of people saying, hey, come down to the Tampa RV show. I'll come down and see us. We had a lot of friends and family coming down into Florida, so we wanted to go see them. So that was a lot of what drove us down there. And then we ended up spending about 2/3 of the time. But the Keys was definitely a highlight. Just cruise around in the e-bikes, and it's, it's 80 degrees in the day and 75 at night. And it's kind of funny because when you're coming from Colorado, you have to kind of keep an eye on what the weather is when you're getting out of the house. But down there, you're like, 24 hours a day, I'm going wearing shorts and a t-shirt. That doesn't.
There were a few cold snaps, though. There were a few cold snaps we had, but we did get to some. So that was our first time staying. We stayed at a park called Sunshine Key RV Resort, which we'd visited before, and friends were staying there. But as Mark said, it's the first time we were able to secure a reservation because we've got a camping membership that allows us to stay there for a very low nightly fee. So that was more than paid for itself. And then we discovered a new campground that some of you might have heard of. I wouldn't even call it a campground, actually. I'd call it an RV resort. If you haven't heard of it, you want to check it out. It's Camp Margaritaville in Auburndale. And we'd never heard of Auburndale before, but it's kind of between Orlando and Tampa. And what was great about that And this is actually one of the tips that we share with people too. And I think it's so easy for people to look at the cost of a campground and be worried about the nightly rate. But this place has so much going on. You don't need to go anywhere else. Like, you're 40 minutes from Disney, but you don't need to go, was it 40 minutes, an hour, I think, to Disney. We didn't go to Disney. But, you know, when there's a lot going on in the campground, it's in a resort with a lot of great attractions and amenities where you don't have to leave. I think that's a great way of looking at what value you're getting from a nightly rate at an RV park, is you don't have to spend money on gas or go somewhere else and pay for an entry fee to get your entertainment elsewhere. And but that was a fantastic RV resort, and it's part of the Margaritaville family. But this is it's actually a family run campground, and it's beautiful. And we had a great time there. And where else did we go? We went to a motor coach resort in South Carolina. And many motor coach resorts only allow Class A's in, but this one was a little unusual in that it did allow in Class C's of a minimum 25 feet. So we just squeaked in, and that was lovely. Hilton Head Island Motor Coach Resort. So, you know, I think those 2 stays were actually probably the majority of our campground spend on the whole trip. The rest of the stays were either very low or even no nightly fee, depending on, you know, how long we stayed.
Some because of the smaller rig, we as Julie mentioned, we previously traveled with big Class A's, tow, and a car. And this trip we had a small Class C with electric bikes, and so it was a much more nimble rig. So it was actually really fun to have that different travel experience. But it also made it really easy to stay, you know, do driveway surfing or harvest house or other simple or boondocking in smaller spaces. You just have a lot more flexibility with that small rig, which was really
and even
fun.
just securing campsites, because I know somebody commented in one of our videos the other week, said, well, all campgrounds are booked out 3 years in advance. Well, that's not true. I would say in the popular places like Florida in the winter, many of them might be booked out a year or 2 in advance, I'm sure. But right now, a lot of people are making changes or cancellations to their travel plans. But what kind of rig do you have? And I'll be interested to hear from Michelle and Ben of their experience, because they've got a big 5th wheel and a truck. And with this little 25-foot motorhome, I think we were able to get a lot of last-minute sites because we were so small. Whereas if we had a bigger rig, I don't think we could have achieved that as easily.
Well, let's pivot over to Ben and Michelle from Intentional Adventure. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about Intentional Adventure? I know you introduced yourself briefly, and then kind of some of the things you've been up to lately.
Okay, great. So, yeah, Michelle is really good at talking, but I do a lot of the talking, so I try to defer. If she's happy, I'm happy. No, listen, we are really passionate about building family. We're passionate about homeschooling, about plant-based eating, and honestly, just choosing the life that you want to live instead of letting it be chosen for you. So when we decided to travel, I own a business back in Florida. You probably have never heard of a business that does this, but I rent chandeliers for events. So that helps fund what we do, but I've been doing that for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And
that's what I call a niche business, Ben.
Yeah, it's very, very niche business. I ship chandeliers to Canada. I shipped them all over the world and all throughout the US. So it's a really cool business, but that brings a whole different level of stress because I consistently have to be connected with my team. I have business meetings. I have to make sure that I'm thinking through where we're going to be and do we have signal? Do we have internet? So there's a lot of challenges in this lifestyle, but I think to give a quick overview, we are doing this because we want our kids to be raised differently than the status quo. We want to experience a life that's completely different than what we were experiencing in the sticks and bricks life. And we're passionate about sharing that with other people, which is why we do have our channel and we share videos and all that, because we want people to consider something different and live an hour of memories. So there's the quick intro. I don't know if that answers some of the questions.
Yeah, I think so. I think it gives us a good idea of what you guys are all about. What are some adventures you've taken recently that kind of stick out in your mind, maybe the last year or so?
Well, we've been trying to get out to California since 2020, and, everything changed, and, so many, in part of this nomadic lifestyles, you just have to be open to change because it's going to happen. So we finally made it out to California, and that was our 48th state. So, we're on our 5th year of travel, but we finally made it to the 48th. So we'll eventually get to Alaska, Canada, hopefully, and Hawaii, but probably not with the RV. We actually have a 43-foot fifth wheel. So it is large, and to go back to what Julie was saying about, finding campgrounds that will hold an RV this size is definitely a consideration. I do try to plan things out in advance if I really want a specific place, because it is going to book up quickly. But we can find things usually, even within a month, to be able to fit in. No, we can't get into the national parks, not a lot of state parks, but every now and then we can find something cool like that. But we can find something, it just might not be exactly where we want it to be.
Flexibility is key.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, you bring up some of the national parks and state parks, and obviously that's Kurt's domain, far and away, more so than any of us. But if you can't stay in the national parks and state parks, is there still a desire to see that? And then how do you adjust to that and compensate for, I want to see this national park, but I can't stay in it?
Yeah, so we actually prefer in our travels to visit national parks, state parks. We are very much outdoorsy people. We like to do hikes. We love the mountains, the rivers and lakes, and we love all these things. And so, we can't always camp inside of the park, but we are usually within 30 minutes to an hour away. So it is an easy enough trip. And I'm sure Mark and Julie will understand this, but you kind of stay in one spot and then you just travel around to visit what you can. For us to drive an hour and a half to go see something of interest to us is not a big deal.
Well, I think that's so true, because, even in our regular lives, when we had our house before we hit the road, it was so funny to me that we had so many family and friends that lived in town, and they'd always make comments, "Oh, you guys live so far away." And it was like 30 minutes, and yet we're in this RV lifestyle. And we've had friends, when we were doing our remodel project on our RV up in Oregon, we had some friends that were in Washington said, it's only 6 hours. We're totally going to come down. And so I just think that's so different than what you see in a regular lifestyle. It's just the different perspective on what is far. And then part of that, of course, is that you're carrying your home with you, so that when you drive 6 hours, well, you have your house. You don't have to go back. But I think that's a big factor in why. But I just, when you made that comment, I just had to share that. I think that's one of the most fun things about the full-time RV life.
And there are a lot of people who would ask, well, a lot of people think, especially in California where you guys are, and the state parks and national parks are much smaller, and the rows are not as accommodating to the bigger rigs. And we hear people, and they ask us, well, I want to go full time, and what size rig should I get? And, I want to get the smallest possible rig and stay under 30 feet because I want to be able to get into the national parks. And our response to that is, look, if you're going to full time, you want to be in a rig that you're going to be comfortable, because you don't want to plan 90% of your life around only 10% of where you're going to stay.
Yeah,
because good luck getting a reservation in a national park. You might have the rig, but if you can't get the reservation, you're not taking your rig. But there are many private campgrounds outside of every national park and state park within a 20, 30, 40, 50 mile radius. And, the further out you go, obviously, the more affordable they become. The ones that are right in close to the national parks, obviously you charge a premium. But I think a lot of people get so focused on the national parks, and you'll get to explore them in your tow vehicle, or if you're in a small B or C, like we were in, then you can do it in that. But you don't have to be in camping inside the national parks to still really enjoy so much of what they have to offer.
Absolutely.
That's so true. Yep.
Kurt, you want to weigh in a little bit? I'm just curious what you think the difference is for people. Like, you're going on a road trip too, aren't you? Where are you going?
Oh, I'm going to Iowa.
to see a national park, or for something else?
Well, I'm going for a wedding, a family wedding, but along the way, I'm going to drive across Wyoming and across Nebraska, and there's a couple park sites in Nebraska I'm going to stop at, and on the way back, I'm going to stop at a couple in Kansas. So, a lot of folks look towards the big national parks, the Yosemites and the Yellowstones and the Rocky Mountains. And there's really a lot of smaller jewels out there that people are unaware of or think they're not worth visiting. And I'm going to 4 of them that I've never been to before, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Where are you going?
You want to come along? I need a shotgun rider.
Maybe that's why. Like, where are you going? I need to know
it's
first.
Only 2 weeks.
I'm open to it.
The first site is Scotts Bluff National Monument in western Nebraska. And from there, I'm going to head over to Homestead National Monument of America that interprets the whole homesteading era of the United States. On the way back, I'm going to hit Tallgrass Prairie National Reserve, which is, as the United States expanded, we kind of ran over all the landscape. We turned it into farms. We tilled under the tallgrass prairie and the shortgrass prairie. And this unit of the National Park Service preserves a segment of that tallgrass prairie. And along with it, you've got a nice little bison herd there that the Nature Conservancy helps maintain. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the landscape used to look like 150, 200 years ago with all the native species there. And then I'm going to stop at Fort Larned National Historic Site in western Kentucky. And, after the Civil War was over, a lot of the troops were sent to the west, to the frontier, to battle the Native American cultures, to force them out. And a sad part of our history, Fort Laramie National Historic Site in eastern Wyoming is one of my favorite sites from that period, but unfortunately it's not as kept up. A lot of the buildings are gone now, but Fort Larned supposedly is the most complete fort setting from that era. So I'm really looking forward to visiting it and seeing what life was like there. Different chapters of America that not necessarily your sprawling panoramic vista parks, but important nonetheless.
That's awesome.
Well, I think that's something great for like the other couple when they're raising their kids, road schooling. That's one of the things. I mean, they can speak more to this, but I imagine that's one of the things that's great for them is to be able to have that immersive experience and be able to teach history through the national park systems and more hands-on. But yeah, I'd love for them to share more about that.
Oh yeah, homeschooling is a whole different world when you can travel to these places. It's phenomenal. The kids are able to just soak up so much, and you know how it is. Like you can only get so much from a book anyway. But same thing when you're on site, you can only get so much from the site. We try to combine, we try to give them, some experience ahead of time and then experience there. And when they combine it, they don't even know what they've got. It's funny how we talk about stuff and they're like, oh yeah, Mount Rushmore. We went there like 3 times, and we walked up the mountain. Their experiences are so vast that I think it'll be a while before they realize. But right now we're preparing to go to Alcatraz, and Michelle just yesterday was reading a book about it and kind of telling the story about it. So it just comes to life when you can combine homeschooling and traveling. It's an amazing experience, and we love the result we've got so far.
Yeah, that's a big part of the National Park Service, the education mission, the interpretive mission. And, Brian, just recently, a couple months ago, the Travelers started a monthly webinar series. And our next webinar is coming up on June 6th. And we've got a ranger from Everglades National Park who directs our education program. And one of the fascinating things, there's actually 2 fascinating things. One is really fascinating, one is sad fascinating. But they bring in 20,000 school children a year to Everglades to introduce them to their backyard, this incredible national park. The sad, fascinating thing is that she does not have a budget through the National Park Service. She depends on grants to maintain her program and the 11 employees. So, we talk about the national parks and everybody tends to think that everything is wonderful with the National Park Service and the National Park System. And there's a lot of challenges out there. In so many different areas that need to be addressed.
Absolutely, I can agree with that, and certainly through funding through the federal government, it has been short, and some recent federal legislation has passed, Great American Outdoors Act, and some other funding that's coming through various pandemic relief efforts that is going to go into public lands. Because I think one of the things that I'm always surprised when I talk to, whether it's Fish and Wildlife people, the Forest Service and National Park Service, is how understaffed they really are. You'll have a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service of hundreds of acres. I said, well, how many people are here to help visitor services and protect the resources? And well, we have 1.5 FTEs, and then the rest are made up of volunteers. And it's just, wow. I mean, what dedicated people to work like that. So, I think one of the things that we coming out of the pandemic that we've seen is a bipartisan effort to put more funding behind our federal land agencies, and I, it's going to take some time, but I think at least the funding is moving in the right direction. But all of us that are part of outdoor recreation community need to support those efforts and support those people on the ground who are really they're doing it out of love. Let's face it, they're not making a ton of money. They're doing it out of love for the resource and love for the people that use the resources like us.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I was on the road before, well, during when I was starting my business, actually homeschooling too, Ben and Michelle. And so I understand that kind of learning methodology and how it benefits people. But yeah, the education that's available in the national park system and things like that is just, it's unmatched. It really is. And whether that's you're staying in the national park, you're staying in a private park, whatever it may be, you can still go get that education and seek it out. So we were talking about Balloon Fiesta, and Albuquerque has an amazing couple of historical sites there. It's a petroglyph, I think. It's been years since I've been there. Petroglyph National Monument, and all kinds of really cool stuff. So, has any of this impacted Shane? You're kind of quiet over there. How does this work with Canadian national parks? Do you know it all, or not the education necessarily? But I mean, if you can touch on that if you want. But some of the funding and the governments and how that interacts with the RV industry.
Well, they keep on providing funding by the federal government, but as far as we're concerned, not in the right places. We want to see the development more campsites and at some of our national parks, but unfortunately, I don't know where the money goes. We keep on seeing in all the budgets that so many millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars are set aside, but it just doesn't seem to, as far as we're concerned, get into the right places.
Brian, this seems like a perfect segue to point out that National Parks Traveler, although we are based in the U.S. and probably 90% of our coverage is on the U.S., we do have a Canadian editor for readers up north who want to stay on top of what's going on in the Canadian national park system. And we do touch on some of those problems in terms of, lacking funds or lacking staff, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll have to make it a point to try to read your website more often.
You really should. Yeah.
There's a list of 400 things bookmarked in my browser. These are important. I should get to today from 4 months ago. So I'm working on it. But it's all so tied together, and that's what's so fascinating to me. The RV industry, outdoor rec, education, our kids, how they're growing up, what they're seeing and learning and adapting to, and how they prefer to travel. And it's all such a big, huge circle. Cara, you've been camping recently. Didn't you go to the RVDA of Alberta's little education training event recently?
RV Learning Weekend was, May 13th to the 15th. Unfortunately, I couldn't stick around the way I wanted, but it was a really fabulous event. They had about 150 RV owners come out for the weekend, and RVDA of Alberta hosts several seminars on right from basics up to advanced kind of RVing topics that attendees can register for. And then, of course, there's all the fun stuff too. They've got, parties and dances and things for the kids to do and all kinds of things, all at a really awesome resort here in Alberta, Old McDonald's Resort, right on Buffalo Lake. They've got a great little beach and spot. Their spot is really, really great for the kids. My kids love it. But overall, it's the first one we've been able to host in a couple of years. So it was really nice to kind of have that in-person, literally hanging around the campfire opportunity again with RVers and RV dealers and RV techs and everybody kind of all at one event like that. Really unique and fun. And I love to be part of RVDA of Alberta because of events like that one. So it was really great.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a part of one of those things, but it seems like an interesting question. Ben and Michelle, Mark and Julie, maybe if you guys want to jump in, or you guys both have large communities who follow you, and I'm sure they run kind of the gamut from the people who are also full-time RVers to the people who are just getting into it, especially during the pandemic, who just maybe bought a rig and have questions. So what are the different types of comments that you hear from people both at the beginning and maybe not the end, but more advanced into their journeys? I know that's a very broad question. I'm intentionally leaving it broad.
It
So you
is.
guys
I'm
take it
trying to
whatever
think
direction you
of
want. So.
specifics.
Well, let's start with the beginning, right? So for the
Yeah.
people who are getting into the industry for the first time, what kind of questions do you see that are being asked of people like you who are clearly experts?
Well, I don't know if they're experts. We've been doing it a while, but I guess we know more than the people that are starting out, right? But
Yeah.
I think one thing that we find is a lot of people, they're very focused on the rig, and what's the right rig for them, and trying to get that decision to be perfect. And it's very difficult to do that. I think a lot of people, it's great. There's so much content and so many other RVers sharing their experiences out there. As we've been doing since 2014, there's so many different kinds of RVs, the way they do it, the kinds of rigs they're in. I think it's easy for people to just say, well, I like that couple, I'm going to get what they got. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the right fit for you, but I think there's one thing I'd like for all new RVers to know is it's a really small percentage of people are going to nail their perfect rig that's going to last them for years on the first go. And so, sometimes it takes a little, travel needs change. We've had 2 Class A's and we loved those. And they were fantastic for full timing, but we're really loving this little Class C we've been traveling in as well, just for a different kind of experience. We're in a different life stage now. We've done all the 50 states, only 48 with the RV, but, we've done a lot of things and now we're looking for different kinds of experiences. So I think people that are new, just to really keep in mind that it's a really high chance that you'll probably change rig within the first year or 2.
Well, and to your other point, that they seem to be spending a disproportional amount of time on the vehicle and not as much on how they'll use it and live the lifestyle and other factors that they need to consider, like where
they all need repairs and maintenance.
Where they're going to stay with it, where they're going to, if they're part-time, where they're going to store it, where they, all these other factors and all the other costs.
And budgeting for everything, not just budgeting on the rig, because, if you're not full-time, most people need to pay for storage. We all need to pay for repairs and maintenance, obviously gas and campgrounds. But, I just think I know a lot of people jumped in 2020 and 21 with COVID, a lot of what they called COVID campers, I think, and it's all very new and exciting. But I think the reality of RV ownership is also catching up with a lot of them. And we're hearing about things like camp reservation fatigue. I don't know if you've heard that term, where people are just getting tired from what's becoming like a part-time job, just making your campground reservations.
Because it's harder to find the reservations than it was in the past.
I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here. I just realized I think it's just really managing those expectations, because people get so excited about the RV and we're going to go travel and have these adventures and go to parks and we're going to go kayaking and all of these great things. And it is all of those wonderful things. But I think by managing expectations of being aware of all of those other things help balance that out so that, it doesn't become overwhelming.
And it sets them up better for long-term success.
Right. So that's what we really want to see, is not people that jump in and then find it's, these things are too much for me and then jump out again. That's why we create the content that we do, to really help manage expectations so that people can understand what they're getting into, do their homework, do their research, do their budgets, and then keep doing this for years and years and years to come. And budget in for that. You'll probably will change rig along the way. So it was probably a long answer to a short question.
No.
But Ben and Michelle.
Well, let's talk about this year or two, because I'm curious if Phil or Shane can kind of weigh in on this from a dealership industry perspective.
Well, we had some discussion about this recently, and there's actually some data that was shared at the RV Industry Power Breakfast that Shane attended and that I monitored from afar because I couldn't attend in person. But they were talking about the number of trade-in vehicles year 2019, 2020, and 2021. And it seems like from the initial data collection that those are higher. Okay. But what's unclear is why that's happening. Is it because, as you talked about, they just bought a rig because that's what was on the dealer's lot, and now the availability on the towable side is much better for the dealers, and they're moving on to a different unit that's more fitting for how they're going to use it, or are they getting out? And that's what we need to do some more research on and find out. So that was definitely, it is definitely top of mind for the people on the business side of RVs, because for the long-term health of the industry, we want to retain all those COVID campers, if you will, and have them buy again in the future for the health of the industry. We don't want them one and done.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel there was such a shortage, from the summer of 2020, and then the supply chain issues and just the sheer demand of it, that I think a lot of people were just buying what they could get. I mean, I don't know the numbers on it, obviously, but you would know better than us. But that's what we were hearing a lot of, is I'm just going to grab this so I can get out of the house and not be locked up.
Yeah. And hopefully that's the reason. But I got a question, Mark and Julian, Ben and Michelle. So there's a lot of, like Phil said, there's a lot of new people getting into this industry. And I love what Alberta did with the RV Learning Weekend. We need more of that. Now, new buyers, they buy these things and they don't know the components or what makes up an RV and how it even works. Do you think that there should be more education on maybe schematics? Okay, this is the plumbing system. This is the electricity. This is where the heartbeat is. This is what could go wrong. Do you guys think that there should be more accessibility from either dealers, manufacturers, or suppliers on those things?
I do believe there's an opportunity for more education on that and delivered in a format that's more favorable too. I mean, I was, that said, I am happy that our newer RV has a better owner's manual than the previous, but I also know that not everybody's like me and reads owner manuals. But I do think there's a big opportunity for education and learning, and whether that comes from manufacturers or from industry in general, wherever it comes from, I do think there's a huge opportunity for more education to help this long-term success of the RV industry, because the more informed people are, because a lot of the things that go wrong in an RV are because of the people not knowing how to use it properly. So if they're not using the appliance properly and or maintaining it properly, it's premature failure. And if they would have done it right, they would have not had to get the RV into the shop. And so there wouldn't be as much of an RV tech shortage if people knew more about how to maintain them, more how to take care of them, and more how to do things themselves. And so I think empowering the RV population to do more themselves and to make better choices is very valuable. I think there's a big need for that.
I do think this is where influencers come in, because the reality is people don't read manuals. You could literally post every instruction in the RV with a sticky note and they would just go and remove them. Like, people don't do research. They don't read instructions. They don't want to be told what to do. But then when it breaks, they want to complain. This is why I think the beauty of the influencer world has become necessary for stuff like this, because people will watch TV, but they're not going to read a manual. I mean, I read the other day that most people with their iPhones, they know about 3% of what it can do. 3%, that's it. They do not use features. They don't go online. They don't watch YouTube. I mean, they just do whatever they can and they move forward. And iPhones don't even come with instruction manuals anymore because
they're so intuitive and easy to use compared to an RV.
The other key, I think, is in our industry, I think the RV industry has to become more intuitive. For instance, one of the silliest things that I have seen in almost every RV is where fifth wheel, I should say, is where they put light switches. Like, there are simple things, but in my rig, and I love my rig. In fact, we are one of the few people that actually picked a rig that we have kept the entire time. Our most recent one, which was literally just an upgrade to the newest version of what we had originally. We love that rig. But the light switch for the living room is like behind a panel. The first light switch when you come in is turning a fan on. So there's little things that just make no sense, but probably made sense to the guy in the warehouse. So I think as an industry, if people are going to continue living in these, the industry is going to have to become a little bit more simplified and smarter and intuitive, as you mentioned, so that people don't have to read the manuals. And then, I think they should continue working with influencers to pass along the important information to be educational in an entertainment format, because that seems to be where people are getting their information in those 8-second TikToks that we have to do about turning your water heater on,
Yeah, excellent points.
Completely
Ben. We totally
agree.
agree with you. Yeah.
And we would, we've been doing this for 8 years now. We would love to see more collaboration, more partnership with RV industry, with manufacturers, with companies, because, Ben, you exactly, and even articulated better than I could have, exactly what I was going to say before you just, I'm glad you did, because that's what people are watching. And if you look at how many followers manufacturers have, most of them only have a fraction of what the RV content creators have. And this is not an ego thing. It's just so much as that's what people are relating to and understanding and enjoying. And it's the entertainment side of it. And to your point, Ben, we're like a couple of oldies that just started on TikTok recently. It's like really, really against it, to be honest. I'm like, I have so many social media platforms to keep up with, but I had to face the reality. This is where the people are. This is, one of the platform, Instagram, Facebook, of course, as well, YouTube, but that TikTok's kind of really growing fast right now. And so we did a recent video that was born out of Mark reading our manual for the Class C Winnebago on how to sanitize the fresh water tank. And I think one of the creative, interesting challenges I'm finding by creating this short form content, which people are able to consume anywhere and everywhere, right? You're waiting in line to get your Starbucks, you're in the bathroom, or you can consume it very quickly and fit it into everything in your life, basically. And I think that's what people are doing. So if we turn this sanitizing your RV fresh water tank into I don't know how long it was, maybe 30-second TikTok video. So there's a real creative challenge there on how to get the important information across in a way that kept people engaged and entertaining and fun, but they learned something and they saved it and kept it and shared it. And that's had, 140,000 views in the last, less than a month, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So, that's that. I don't know how many RV manufacturer, no offense to any of them, have got a RV freshwater sanitation video that might have had that kind of, response and engagement. So I think there's a great opportunity here for some more conversation and partnership around how can we work together, because I think we all want the same thing. We all want to have better educated RVs out there so they have a better experience and they stay on the road and they keep enjoying this RV life, and they're not taking their RV into the shop to, replace a fuse or, flip the breaker, because that is what's taking up a lot of the time. And, appointments at RV repair shops that are completely short-staffed, and, that's the whole challenge of the state of RV repairs. But, to reduce that, something like 80% of RV repairs can be tackled by the RV owner with the right information and knowledge, but how to make it fun for them to learn. And that's why they're watching the videos and the social media. That's what they're doing, is they're wanting to be entertained, but they actually do want to learn if it's done in a fun way.
Well, that's the thing. It has to be fun and interesting, and I'm sure Shane and Phil probably want to weigh in on this, because I think it's a good idea. What they think, I can't put words in their mouth, but you're right about the interesting and fun, and it doesn't matter the length. Like, people will consume the TikToks 30 seconds, but they'll sit down on Netflix and they'll binge watch a show for 9 hours straight on the weekend because it's interesting. And so all these statistics you see to keep your videos 2 minutes or less, you just have to make them interesting. That's all you have to do, and people will watch you for an hour or 30 seconds or whatever it is, but they'll watch your message.
And sometimes I watch 2 hours worth of 8-second TikTok videos.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
Like, I don't have time to watch a 30-minute YouTube video, but I'll watch 3 hours of TikTok videos. That's and believe me, I've been in marketing for 30 years, and so it's changed so much from my history. So I'm really having to rewire my brain around how to deal with all this. But it's a fun, creative challenge.
Well, it sounds like you just need to have Mark read the manual. And you did. Go ahead, Cara. Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I was just laughing I just had that conversation with my 14-year-old about 3 hours worth of TikTok videos.
But anyway, so something like Phil. Well, sorry, Cara, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good. I think it's so difficult to fit in valuable content in those short windows of time because there's so much to cover. And so you do have to be really creative. I'm still kind of struggling to wrap my brain around establishing TikTok channels for the associations and their respective pages. And I tip my hat to you guys that take it on. It's a tough.
Well, Ben and Michelle do a lot of humor in their channel.
Yeah,
so
they're one of the funny couples.
Yeah,
We've got to work on our funny couple stuff.
It's going. Yeah, I love it.
Well, now I don't want to get this conversation that we had going on lost here, right? And I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't mean to cut you off. We're just kind of, I'm trying to swing it back. I hope the same place you are, because Shane kind of brought up this question, and I think we kind of took it down a path that's even more interesting than maybe Shane intended. So go ahead.
Oh,
Shane.
I intended this.
Yeah, this is gold.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that one of the things that we've found is that there isn't, among some of the brands, especially, you've got Forest River, Winnebago, and Thor products. And the challenge is we've had people attempt to make kind of generic, here's how you RV videos. Well, that only goes so far because people are very interested in the specific model and how that unit works versus some kind of a generic, well, it might be different on your rig, but this is, they want to see how does it work on a Grand Design? How does it work on a Keystone? How does it work on a Salem or whatever the model is specifically? And I think some of the manufacturers have made some strides in this area, but certainly I think partnering with influencers could help give people the specific knowledge for the problem they have at that specific time versus, here's a RV lifestyle video that tries to cover way too much things versus what the problem is right there at the campground that they're trying to address.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is some good opportunity too there with the industry, with the campgrounds, because they're getting the new campers rolling up for the first time in their new RV, not knowing how to back it up, how to get it level, how to get it working. And so I think that falls on a lot of campground owners as well. We hear from our contacts in the industry there is that's I think a great avenue for people to learn that. And we've got a lot of ideas around how this stuff, maybe this is a conversation for another time because it would be long, but, just how to get that information to people in a way. And I think the dealers, Phil, have a great opportunity there too, because people are looking to learn from the dealer. I know a lot of dealers do provide some educational content out there, but, I always wonder why, say, for example, RV insurance, why is there not, a discount for those that have gone through a certain amount of RV education or something, or gone through certain courses, or maybe there's an incentive for, if a customer goes through a certain amount of educational content, they get some special something. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of possibilities there to explore for sure. But making it fun and easy to consume is everyone's just overwhelmed. There's a lot more content out there now than there was when we started, which is a big reason why we started sharing. But I think the other challenge that consumers have now is there's so much information out there. How do you sift through and know what's the good information? How do you know what's accurate? And how do you know, there's a lot of content out there. There have been some studies done, I understand, that says that something like 60% of content out there is inaccurate and about 30% is downright dangerous. Don't quote me the source on that, but that's what I heard from somewhere in the industry. I don't know how true that is, but I think the consumer ends up trusting just who they like and who they follow, and not necessarily, But I think that's everything, not just RVing. You need to dig a little deeper to make sure you're getting good information.
And I think that does come back to the partnership with manufacturers, because in theory, they would do their research to make sure that the influence they're choosing is actually bringing proper information. So that could help validate that influencer in the overall field, which I think would be really helpful for people to come in and say, okay, I'm a Forest River person. And they say, yeah, check our page. We've got a couple of influencers that have information that's really helpful. Well, then that helps give them some, not experts, but somebody who knows what they're doing and is giving accurate information. So again, that partnership, I think, is so important for new people coming in and for anybody who's trying to figure it out with these new RVs.
Yeah, well said.
Totally.
Shane, you want to wrap it up with any comments based on what you heard?
No, it's this is a great conversation. And it's funny how things have evolved. People want to learn, but they want to they have a short attention span, so they want to be entertained as well. And what a switch, from before. This is great. And I wanted to learn I love talking to full timers just to learn, because there's so many things to learn. So it's been a real pleasure, listening to you guys, talk about, the problems and what you feel that the industry needs to do to help everybody out.
Well, we appreciate you inviting us to be part. This has been fun to chat with everyone and to really have enough time to delve into so many topics, as we have so many interviews we do are really short and you just scratch the surface. But I love that, we've been able to go deeper on some of these really important issues that impact all of us and all of these, new RVers as well, and dreamers. And, we don't want them to be scared off by seeing all the bad stuff on the internet. We want them to, get the good stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on here. It's been amazing.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate you guys all being here. We still got a couple minutes left. Is there anything else, Kurt, from your side, from national parks, that we should be paying attention to?
One thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, the other week, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee passed out some legislation to address outdoor recreation. It's called America's Outdoor Recreation Act of 2022. And one of the interesting aspects that the RV industry, no doubt, is interested in and watching, and Phil might be able to fill in some more blanks, is the legislation, if passed and signed into law by the president, it would allow public-private partnerships to modernize federally owned campgrounds, resorts, cabins, and visitor centers on federal recreational lands and waters. That's going to be something to watch, both from the pro and the con side. I mean, I know the national park campgrounds are last century design stuff, and they can't handle a lot of these bigger rigs and whatnot, and they don't have all the amenities that folks want. So it'll be interesting to see, as this legislation moves forward, what potential impacts it has, not just on national park campgrounds, but on federal landscapes, not just surrounding the national parks, but across the Bureau of Land Management, across the U.S. Forest Service, to see, if we see more public-private partnerships to create bigger and better campgrounds for RVers and whatnot.
Right. The issue for the concessionaires who maintain a lot of the campgrounds, not all, but a lot on federal lands, is they're businesses, so they need a return on investment. So they want to see, like, what has gone on with the ski industry and the U.S. Forest Service, like Vail or Snowbird or some of the big ski resorts. They have longer leases, so they can amortize their expenses over a longer period of time and be profitable. What the concessionaires have said is, we don't have that kind of flexibility on Park Service land. It's a shorter window, 10 years, 15 years. We would like to have a longer lease period so that we can put those investments in and amortize our expenses and make a reasonable profit. So, that's kind of where that's coming from. And, if it works for skiing, why couldn't it work for camping? I guess is one of the arguments there.
Well, the philosophical issue, though, is, the National Park Service, the National Park System, is owned by the public, the general public in the United States. Do we want to turn those into commercial centers? I mean, I live in Park City, Utah. When I was a boy growing up in New Jersey, a lift ticket cost $10 for a day. At Deer Valley or at Park City, $150 is not unusual. And so if you want to turn national park campgrounds into commercial operations for a concessionaire that wants to see a profitable return, what are the rates going to be like? Is that going to lock people out of going to the national parks? Is it going to commercialize the national parks too much and adversely impact the national park experience which is something that's hard to define these days.
Right. And you know, there is the rub, and that's where you have to have a balance, right? And so, you know, I think that this is going to be a subject of negotiation. Certainly, it's the plan has bipartisan support, and we'll see where it goes. You know, I don't think anybody wants to turn the national park system into Disneyland, but at the same time, we do have an antiquated park system, campgrounds, and you know, where's the middle ground there to provide services for everybody while retaining the nature of the campground experience for everybody who wants a more rustic experience plus the more RV experience.
How much time we got, Brian?
Honestly, this is a fascinating topic that perhaps if you guys are willing, because I think the legislation you just said was introduced, can we deep dive into this in a month and see where the legislation is and kind of have a back and forth really between you guys, and maybe we can find some other guests who can contribute to the discussion as well, because I think it's a really fascinating, interesting that we're not going to do it justice in a couple seconds.
Agreed.
All right, let's plan on that. So thank you guys.
I'll be in Kansas. I'll be in Kansas.
But you said you could join. You said you could join mobile if you wanted, right? Is this a good enough discussion to encourage you to join?
It's a great discussion. The question is, how good's the reception out in the middle of no place, flyover country?
Yeah, some are surprisingly good.
Sometimes
because there are less people competing for the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this then. Let's say 2 months from now, when Kurt's back home, so he doesn't have to worry about the internet, and then that gives us plenty of time to kind of research and get some guests together and topics and things like that. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
All right.
Shane, are you okay?
Well, thank
My wall just fell down. About 30 seconds too early.
Too early. Yeah.
Just
well,
like
we are
going-
over, so yeah.
So
But
yeah.
but really, Shane, maybe we could take a Canadian perspective from this too. Cara, I know you're involved in the RVDA. Maybe there's some ways that we can kind of explore how such a thing might operate in Canada too, and kind of really dive into it in the show. It would be really interesting. So, all right. We got to wrap up here. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you joining us for another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Phil, as always, from RVDA, Kurt from National Park Travelers, Shane from CRVA, and a bunch of other things. Cara from the Canadian Camping and RV Council, my co-host, and of course, Mark and Julie from RVLove, Ben and Michelle from Intentional Adventure. Guys, real quick, share your websites and all the things where people can find you for RVLove and International, whichever one wants to go first.
Yeah, well, we're RVLove.com, and pretty much from there you can find all of our socials as well.
Yeah,
Ben and
we are
Michelle?
intentionaladventure.com, and same thing on all the social stuff, Intentional Adventure.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Really appreciate all your contributions, discussions. Had a great show, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.